What if America never needed a gas station? What if, back in 1935, one car already proved that you could drive coast to coast, 3,774 miles, for less than $8 in fuel? It did, and it was sitting in a wooden warehouse, completely forgotten, for 40 years. Ford saw it, Chrysler saw it. It stood on the floor of the New York Auto Show. And then, one SEC investigation killed it overnight. The car that almost ended gasoline in America. And nobody knows it existed. Hit subscribe and tap the bell, because this channel finds the story's history buried. To understand why this story matters, you first need to understand the man behind it. Clessie Cummins was born in 1888 on a farm in Indiana. He was not a formally trained engineer. He never went to a prestigious university, but from the time he was a child, he had an instinct for machines that most people simply cannot learn in a classroom. When he was 11 years old, he built a working steam engine out of molten iron that he poured into wooden molds himself. That engine powered a water pump on his family's farm. As a teenager, Clessie got a job as a mechanic at the Marmon Automobile Company. This was the early 1900s, when the car industry was still finding its footing. And at Marmon, he helped develop the Wasp racing car, the very car that won the first ever Indianapolis 500 in 1911. Right from the start, Clessie Cummins was at the center of American automotive history. But the engine that would define his life wasn't a gasoline engine at all. In 1918, Clessie came across a diesel engine built by a Dutch company called Vid. He was immediately fascinated. At the time, diesel engines were massive, heavy machines used almost entirely in factories and ships. Nobody believed they had a place in a car or a truck. But Clessie saw something different. He saw an engine that could be made practical, efficient, and powerful enough to change transportation forever. With financial backing from a wealthy investor named William Irwin, Clessie founded the Cummins Engine Company in Columbus, Indiana in 1919. The early years were brutal. He tried selling small diesel engines through the Sears catalog to farmers, but Sears had a generous return policy. Farmers would use the engines hard all season, then return them worn out. Cummins ended up with a warehouse full of used engines and almost no money. Farmers would use the engines hard all season, then return them worn out. Cummins ended up with a warehouse full of used engines and almost no money. Most people would have quit. Clessie Cummins went looking for a bigger stage. In the late 1920s, Clessie came up with a simple but bold idea. The best way to prove that diesel engines worked was not to write about it in a brochure. It was to go out and do something impossible in front of everyone. In 1930, he fitted one of his Cummins diesel engines into a mid-1920s Packard limousine and drove it to the New York Auto Show. The engine was loud and it was heavy, but it ran. People stood around that car in the exhibition hall and stared. Nobody had ever seen a diesel-powered passenger car before. The publicity worked. Truck companies started paying attention. And in 1933, Kenworth became the first truck manufacturer in America to offer a Cummins diesel engine as a standard option in their trucks. The trucking industry was about to change forever. But Clessie wasn't satisfied. Trucks were one thing. What he really wanted was to put diesel engines in everyday passenger cars. And to do that, he needed to solve one major problem. The problem was weight. Every diesel engine that existed at that time was made of heavy cast iron. A cast iron diesel weighed far more than the gasoline engines already in passenger cars. Automakers looked at that weight difference and said it simply wasn't practical. No customer would want a car that heavy. Clessie knew that if he couldn't solve the weight problem, his dream of diesel-powered passenger cars would never happen. So he went back to his workshop and started building something that had never existed before. By 1934, Clessie Cummins had finished designing a revolutionary new diesel engine. He called it the Model A. And what made it different from every diesel engine ever built before was this. Instead of using a heavy cast iron block and head, the Model A was built from aluminum. Instead of using a heavy cast iron block and head, the Model A was built from aluminum. Aluminum diesel engines simply did not exist in 1934. Engineers at the time thought aluminum wasn't strong enough or heat-resistant enough for diesel combustion. Clessie disagreed. He engineered the Model A specifically to prove them wrong. Engineers at the time thought aluminum wasn't strong enough or heat-resistant enough for diesel combustion. Clessie disagreed. He engineered the Model A specifically to prove them wrong. The result was a 377 cubic inch, 6-cylinder diesel engine that produced 85 horsepower. And at 870 pounds, it weighed just 80 pounds more than the standard gasoline engine it was replacing. For a diesel, that was almost unbelievable. Clessie had essentially closed the weight gap between diesel and gasoline to almost nothing. Now he needed a car to put it in, and he found the perfect partner in the Auburn Automobile Company. Auburn, based in Connersville, Indiana, was one of the more distinctive car brands of the 1930s. It was owned by E.L. Cord, the same businessman behind Cord and Duesenberg, names that still carry weight in automotive history today. Auburn cars had a reputation for stylish design and for offering impressive performance at prices that were below their luxury competitors. In 1935, Auburn and Cummins agreed to install the Model A diesel engine into a 1934 Auburn sedan. The chassis was built in 1934, and the diesel installation happened at the Cummins plant in Columbus, Indiana, with minimal changes to the car's firewall. Auburn chose a rust-colored 851 four-door convertible for the first public demonstration car. What happens next is one of the most extraordinary road trips in history. On June 17, 1935, Clessie Cummins climbed into the diesel Auburn in NYC and started driving west. A Paramount News film crew was with him, documenting the journey from movie theater newsreels, the television news of the 1930s. The trip was not a race. It was a demonstration. Clessie took it deliberately. Near Las Vegas, he pulled off the road at the construction site of the Hoover Dam, one of the biggest engineering projects in American history, and filmed the car driving across the dam structure. Then, on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, he opened the throttle on that diesel Auburn and pushed it past 100 miles per hour. A diesel passenger car, crossing 100 miles per hour. In 1935, he arrived in Los Angeles on the 4th of July, pulling into the Warner Brothers studio lot for the final leg of the publicity tour. The total distance was 3,774 miles. The total fuel cost for the entire journey was $7.63. The Auburn averaged 35 miles per gallon of diesel, which cost less than half what gasoline cost. Let that sink in for a moment. A cross-country road trip in a full-size passenger car for under $8 in fuel. In a world where the average American was still recovering from the Great Depression, the economic argument for diesel cars was almost impossible to argue against. The press coverage was enormous. Time magazine wrote about the car, automotive publications ran features on it, and for a brief moment, it genuinely looked like American car culture was about to make a sharp turn toward diesel. The momentum after that cross-country drive was real, and it moved fast. E.L. Cord was so impressed that he contracted with Cummins to build 3 diesel-powered 1935 Auburn Airport limousines, likely intended for use by American Airlines, another company that Cord had invested in. In early 1936, one of those diesel Auburns appeared on the floor of the New York Auto Show. Rumors spread immediately that Auburn was planning to offer diesel engines across its entire product line. Some reports even suggested that Ford and Chrysler were watching closely and considering their own diesel passenger car programs. Think about what that would have meant. If Ford, the largest automaker in America, had moved into diesel passenger cars in 1936, the entire trajectory of American car culture could have been different. The V8 gasoline engine that became the symbol of American performance might have been replaced, or at least joined, by diesel power as a mainstream choice for ordinary American families. Under the agreement, Cummins was contracted to convert 8 base-model Auburn sedans for production testing. These weren't show cars, they were pre-production vehicles. It was closer than most realized. And then, in 1936, everything collapsed. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission launched an investigation into Auburn Automobile Company for questionable stock practices connected to E.L. Cord's business empire. The financial situation at Auburn was far worse than it looked. Cord's entire empire, Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg, was under serious financial pressure. Financial ruin was imminent. Clessie Cummins, who had spent years building his company through careful decisions and bold gambles, saw what was coming. He made a calculated choice. He canceled the contract with Auburn and walked away from the partnership. He kept the 8 converted sedans himself, but the deal was dead. Auburn Automobile Company produced its last car in 1936. By 1937, the entire Auburn Cord Duesenberg empire had ceased production. One of the most distinctive chapters in American automotive history ended not with a bang, but with an SEC filing. Clessie Cummins personally drove one of the diesel Auburn sedans until 1937, when he was forced off the road near Madison, Indiana, by a driver who cut him off. He swerved to avoid a collision and wrecked the car. The car was scrapped, but he saved the engine and installed it in another Auburn sedan. That second car, a white 1935 Auburn 655 sedan, survived. Cummins stored it for decades. In 1974, it was rediscovered in a wooden warehouse south of the Columbus engine plant, and Cummins had it fully restored. Today, it sits in the Cummins Heritage Center in Columbus, Indiana, and it still runs. The pristine white 1935 Auburn sedan on display. It looks brand new. A mechanic's hand turns the key. The engine roars to life. After Auburn collapsed, Clessie Cummins turned his full attention back to trucks. By the late 1930s, Cummins had captured 75% of the heavy-duty truck engine market in America. When World War II began, the US military relied heavily on Cummins diesel engines. By the end of the war, Cummins engines were in virtually every major trucking company fleet on the continent. In 1989, Dodge officially contracted with Cummins to supply diesel engines for the Ram pickup truck. Within 2 years, demand grew to nearly 1 million units. The Cummins name became legendary. But the passenger car diesel dream never came back in America. In Europe, diesel passenger cars became extremely common by the 1980s and 1990s. In the United States, a failed attempt by Oldsmobile to sell a diesel passenger car in the late 1970s, a car that had serious reliability problems, poisoned American consumers against diesel for decades. That car had serious reliability problems and poisoned American consumers against diesel for decades. The road not taken became a road forgotten. The 1934 Auburn with the Cummins diesel engine sits today as a reminder of a road not taken. A man from an Indiana farm who built his first engine at age 11 spent his entire life trying to prove that diesel belonged in the cars of everyday Americans. He was right about the efficiency. He was right about the technology. He just ran out of time. And ran out of a business partner who could survive long enough to see it through. If things had gone even slightly differently, if Auburn had been on solid financial ground, if one SEC investigation had gone the other way, you might be driving a diesel car right now, spending half as much on fuel, and the entire history of the American automobile might have looked completely different. That's what makes this story worth remembering. Hit subscribe right now and tap that bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. Leave a comment below. What Ford model do you think changed history the most? Stay connected.